Hey everyone, Chris here, and welcome to my channel. For today's 5 on Friday, I'm going to talk to you about my top 5 middle grade standalones of 2020. First up is Song for a Whale by Lynn Kelly. In this book, we follow Iris, who is deaf, and she goes to an all-hearing school, and it makes it very hard to feel like she fits in. One day, she learns about a whale called Blue 55. This whale also doesn't fit in, as he sings at a different frequency than most whales do, so he can't communicate with other whales. This makes her feel a connection to him, and she is determined to find a way to communicate with this whale. She is really good at dealing with fixing like computers and old radios, and she is determined to create a song that Blue 55 will understand. I absolutely adored this book. It is one of my favorite books that I read all year. I really enjoyed seeing how Iris struggled to fit in. I really liked how she had a deaf friend, and when she was hanging out with him one day and some of his friends from his school, which was an all-deaf school, she realized that they had a way of speaking sign language that she wasn't privy to because she didn't go to the school. She learned sign language that her grandparents learned because both of her grandparents were deaf. So she's kind of struggling with the idea that she doesn't fit in anywhere, and she lost her grandfather, who she was really close to, and she's struggling to maintain that connection to her grandmother, who is dealing with her own grief. And then she finds this whale and identifies with him and can kind of put herself in his shoes and really understand what that must be like for him. And so I really enjoyed getting to see her make that connection and try to come up with a way to connect with this whale who is in some ways all alone, kind of like she feels. The second book I'm going to talk about is Towers Falling by Jewel Parker Rhodes. This follows a girl named Deja who is starting a new school in 5th grade. She is kind of struggling to fit in as her family is homeless and lives in a shelter, and it really makes her feel like she doesn't fit in with her classmates. She is then assigned a project about September 11th. For her, this is completely unknown, as she has no idea the significance of September 11th and the two towers that are no longer in the sky. With her new friends, Ben and Sabine, she has to figure out the significance of September 11th and how that affects her community and her family. I enjoyed this book because as somebody who lived through 9/11, I connected with the stories that were told about that day. But it was interesting to realize that there is a whole generation of kids out there who have no idea the significance of that day or what it was like to kind of live through that day. So it was really interesting getting to see Deja and her classmates kind of discover the story of 9/11, and it was really interesting seeing her kind of have that conversation and talk to her parents and hear her teacher talk and see what it's like, because this book takes place in New York City, so it is even more significant what happened to the people who lived in New York City on this day. So I thought it was a really fascinating look at somebody who is looking at 9/11 as just a historic event, not something that happened to them. And I think this is an important topic for kids who weren't around for 9/11 or weren't old enough to understand what was going on to talk about. So I really enjoyed getting to look at it from that point of view. And like I said, I will never forget where I was or what was going on or how I felt on 9/11. So it was really interesting to see how the author managed to include some of those emotions in this book for someone who has, like I said, no idea what that day was like. Next up is Wonderstruck by Brian Selznick. This is definitely a book I would recommend you physically read because half of the story is told from Ben's point of view, and he really wishes he could know his father as he's never met him. The other point of view follows Rose. She is really interested in this mysterious actress and kind of scrapbooks this actress's life. And the interesting part about Rose is that her story is told completely in pictures. So this really isn't a book that you can listen to on audiobook. You actually need the physical book because there are no words in Rose's parts of the story, just pictures. And it is such an interesting way of telling the story. So their stories, Ben and Rose's, are set 50 years apart. So we have dual timelines. And both these kids end up finding something that causes them to set out on a quest to, in Rose's case, to meet this actress, and in Ben's case, to find out more about his father. And it is interesting to see the back and forth between them and how their stories are very different. And obviously, the way the stories are being told are very different, but the similarities between the two stories being told and kind of how they weave together into this one larger novel. And I really, really enjoyed this book. It is definitely a book I want to own because it's something I can definitely see myself rereading. And it was just such a fascinating way to tell a story. And I really enjoyed how it kind of all worked together, and despite being 50 years apart and bouncing back and forth, really wove together to tell this poignant story for each of these two kids. The next book I'm going to talk about is Echo by Pam Munoz Ryan. So this book follows three different kids who find this harmonica. So you have Frederick, who lives in Germany, Mike, who lives in Pennsylvania, and Ivy, who live in California. They obviously don't have the harmonica at the same time, and it is very interesting to see how this harmonica plays into each of their lives and the importance that this has in each of their lives. Especially when at the beginning of the book we hear about this magical harmonica that this boy named Otto finds, and you kind of wonder how this harmonica ties back to Otto. It is such a fascinating book, and I listened to the audiobook, and that is so cool because there is music in the audiobook that you would not be able to get from the physical book. Like, you actually get to hear the music, and so I really recommend you listen to this on audiobook. And it is just really interesting to see how important this harmonica is in each of these kids' lives, and I just really, really liked this book and the musical aspect of it. And like I said, I really think you should check out the audiobook because having that musical aspect where you can actually hear it, I think definitely enhances your enjoyment of the story. And the last book I'm going to talk about is I Can Make This Promise by Christine Day. In this book, we follow Edie, whose mom was adopted, and she wants to know more about her Native American history, but because her mom was adopted, they don't have that information. And then one day, she's in her attic, and she finds these letters that say "Love, Edith," along with a picture of a woman who looks just like her. And she starts to wonder who this woman is and if there's any significance to this woman in her life. She doesn't quite know how to ask her parents because she figures they knew the box were there and they never brought it up. So she sets out to find out who this woman is. It is also interesting seeing her dynamic with her two friends, as she has very different relationships with both of them and is dealing with that while also dealing with wondering who this woman is and wondering why her parents have never mentioned her, and if she were to ask her parents about her, would her parents tell her the truth. I really, really enjoyed getting to see Edie struggle with her friendships and wanting to know more about her past and her history. I have 3 grandparents who died before I was born, and I have spent my life curious about them and who they were and what they were like and the ways in which I'm similar to them. So I can only imagine how frustrating it must have been for Edie to wonder about that and know that she may not be able to get those answers with her mom being adopted because she figures her mom doesn't have those answers either, only to then find these letters and this woman that looks like her and wondering if this could lead her to some of the answers she's always desperately wanted. And so I really enjoyed getting to read about Edie and her discovery of what was important to her and who this Edith woman was. So those were my top 5 middle grade standalone books that I read in the year of 2020. If you read middle grade, what was your favorite middle grade standalone that you read last year? If you've made it this far in the video, leave me whale emojis in the comments below. Like this video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye!